Welcome, everyone. We'll get started shortly, just waiting for a few more people to arrive, and then Kibo will kick us off. While we're sitting here, if you want to put your name and organization in the chat, that would be great. Introduce yourself to the group.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kiwa Jiscom, the Director for Homeownership. It's a pleasure meeting you all again. I know we spoke on November 30th, and at that discussion, we talked about doing a follow-up today. And today's that meeting where we're going to be able to discuss some of the requirements of continue the discussion on Article 11 Q bonds and talked about some of the distinction between our LIF home ownership and rental program and some of the issues that were brought up in the conversation that we had on November 30th. Today, we hope to respond to some of the questions that were brought up on November 30th to generate further clarification and also give us some more insight on what some of the issues that developers and our partners are feeling with home ownership, and also to create some space for ongoing feedback and questions. We'll also like to discuss some of our next step and some of our strategic step that we're planning to undertake within the home ownership division. And some of those steps could take several months. And I just ask that we be patient through that process. To just go over some of our basic housekeeping rules. This meeting will be recorded. And also the slides will be able to be posted on our website afterwards. I know there could be an opportunity for a lot of conversation. So we just please ask that you stay muted as we do this part of the presentation. And we also ask that you enter a question in the chat at any time as you feel free. And we'll plan to track when people raise their hand, and we'll leave ample time at the end to have some of those questions, to fill some of those questions. So some of the group expectations that I would ask for everyone, and it's something that I also struggle with, so I'll practice this as well. Speak your truth responsibly. Listen to understand. I know I have sometime I listen to respond, but we're asking in this case, please listen to understand. And we also ask that you be willing to do things differently and experience discomfort. I know some of these conversations could be charged, and we just really ask that during this time that you be willing to do things differently and be okay with the discomfort as we try to find solution. And also expect and accept non-closure today, because this is a further conversation, and I feel like we're going to be, as this conversation go forward, we'll be able to get to a spot where we could all be comfortable. So those are the group agreements, and I hope that we can honor them today as we have this discussion or continue discussion. So with no further ado, I'll pass this on to Talia.
Thanks, Keeble. Hi, everyone. I'm Talia Concrevis, she, her pronouns, Assistant Director of Homeownership Programs. And I am just going to start with just reframing. We spoke about this last time at the meeting in November, but just reframing our needs for Article 11Q bonds related to LIFT homeownership. So for LIFT homeownership projects to work, these are just the fundamentals right now, that affordability is not able to be foreclosed. And we do this by having the operating agreement in the first position before any monetary liens. This allows affordability and operational controls to remain in place in the event of a foreclosure. And then we also need operational controls that are meaningful. So these controls are spelled out in the operating agreement, which references the other agreements that LIFT parties sign when they're closing on their deal. And then the LIFT loan must be secured, and currently it's secured by the land. We'll talk about this more, and in the first monetary lien position on the land. And this is primarily addressed by the deed of trust agreement. And so we had, if there are lenders on the project, there may also be an intercreditor agreement or a priority and subordination agreement that addresses these needs as well. And we've put the 4 main agreements up on our website for everybody to look at and review. These are newer templates that we've been using to close our deals, and we'll be welcoming feedback on those templates. And so those are just kind of the glue to the LIFT program and how we make them work. And so last meeting, we, as Keeble described, we went through some key elements of LIFT home ownership and heard a lot of questions from people that are here, people that weren't able to be there, but gave us feedback through our survey. And some of the questions were related to very technical aspects of the program, and then others focused on kind of the foundational structure of LIFT homeownership. Why are we formatting it the way that we do? And so we've grouped these issues into 4 interconnected areas. They all kind of are based on each other, but we wanted to break them down here that we'll talk a little bit more about before moving on to conversation. So those are standardization of appraisals, clarity around substantiation of operational controls, the LIFT loan valuation as it's based on the appraised value of the land, and lender positioning. So I'm just going to go into those a little bit more, and then we'll move into discussion. So first appraisals. For now, the value of the LIFT loan is limited to the lesser of the appraised value of the land plus infrastructure and site work, excluding the home structures, or a $200,000 cap per home, whatever is the lesser. We've identified that there's a need for consistent evaluation of the land to secure the LIFT loan. And so where we've landed for the upcoming NOFA is that, and this is going to be a rolling NOFA, so the appraisal will be required at application, and this will just allow us to really monitor in real time how much LIFT funds have been dispersed to each project. We need to have OHCS named as an intended user with the ability to discuss the report with its preparer. And this has been, I think it was originally named as a practice, and then I think it's been just inconsistently enforced. And then the appraisal includes any existing restrictions attached to the land. So not all land has these restrictions. I don't think we've seen very many deals coming to us that already have some restrictions tied to it. And this appraisal won't include the hypothetical value of the LIFT. It doesn't need to include the hypothetical value of the new LIFT restrictions. And we did get a question last time to just about infrastructure. How do we use the word improved value? And so the appraisal can include the hypothetical value of the improvements on the land. we don't allow for the hypothetical value of the construction improvements. So that's just the key distinction here. We're never taking into account the value of the homes with the appraisal. It's just everything on the land. And that's how we come up with the amount of lift loan you qualify for, which brings us to the next topic, which is lift loan evaluation or valuation. And we heard very loud and clear that the lift loan valuation based on the appraised value of the land plus improvements really doesn't lead to sufficient subsidy, particularly it disadvantages rural projects and multifamily homeownership projects, stacked developments that are seeking density. And so, as just mentioned, we don't have a quick fix for that right now. For the upcoming NOFA, we'll continue basing the lift loan on the appraised value of the land. We'll be using our lift supplemental funds to supplement those the rural projects, and you can see our framework for that. I can post the link to our our NOFA will be coming out soon, so you can see, but it's a per unit cap for the lift supplemental and a per entity cap. And we have $5 million available for that. So that's our kind of quick fix for that. We'll continue to ensure that the lift loan is fully secured by being in the first monetary lien position with respect to the land. However, we acknowledge that this presents challenges to rural and multifamily projects, and we are committed to exploring other options with our stakeholders and DOJ counterparts. So just wanted to say this is going to be a longer term exploration process that we couldn't really have in place for this next NOFA, but it is something that we are looking into for the program down the line, because we know it's a priority to make it a more accessible program and meet the goals of LIFT that it was created to meet in the first place. So the next topic are operational controls. And I just want to be clear here that Article 11 Q-bond language in the Constitution enables the state to use its credit and incur debt to finance the cost of acquiring, constructing, remodeling, repairing, equipping, or furnishing real or personal property that is or will be owned or operated by the state of Oregon. And so the way that OHCS is interpreting this is that we are fulfilling the statute through operational controls, not ownership controls. So if folks have questions on that, we're happy to post a memo, an opinion from the Attorney General that defines ownership and why we don't, it defines ownership, which can explain why we don't see our role as ownership. And so operational controls include but aren't limited to the first lien on the land that ensures affordability restrictions for the full loan period. And then just this, broad category of ability to take action if the borrower is out of compliance with LIFT terms. And as our practice, we do not encumber the home with the LIFT lien. So our lien is just on the land. And I know there's some confusion about this out there. So with feedback, we can work to clarify this more in our documents. And longer term, we will explore with our counterparts at DOJ what constitutes as sufficient operational controls. And so the last issue that we wanted to bring up here is lender positioning. And so for LIFT homeownership, we can only secure our LIFT investment against the value of the land because the improvements must be wholly owned by the homeowner. We don't want to interfere with the homeowner's loan on the home. One distinction between LIFT rental and LIFT homeownership is that for LIFT rental, we lend up to the appraised value of the land, but take an interest in the improvements. And so this distinction allows us to share the first lien position for rental projects, but not for LIFT homeownership projects. LIFT homeownership loans cannot be under collateralized by other debt. So if developers are taking the full amount that the land appraises for in LIFT funds, this doesn't leave room for a lender to have a shared first position lien on the land. So say the LIFT loan is not the full amount of the appraised value of the land, then it would be okay for a lender to come in and have collateralization on the land. And so just to be very clear, construction lenders can take a first lien on improvements. OHCS is only concerned with the debt being secured by the land and having that not be under collateralized. The rest of the project or other partner assets are not something we take into account when we're thinking about collateralization of the LIF loan. And so we would like to continue understanding your lender's needs related to positioning and foreclosure. For now, we're working with our pipeline deals to close and can connect our DOJ partners with your attorneys to work out specific language for the intercreditor and subordination agreements. I know those weren't agreements that we posted online, and that's just because we're working towards templates as we see common issues and trends related to those agreements. And we'll have standardized templates for those documents down the line, just need a little more time to get there. And then last, there were a few miscellaneous questions that were asked during our call, and we just wanted to address them here. So one was more about passing on a LIFT home to a relative who doesn't qualify as low income. And so OHCS doesn't stipulate the terms of the ground lease between the home buyer and the nonprofit. The nonprofit would just be out of compliance with LIFT terms if there is a resale of the home, and through the resale process, it goes to a home buyer who is not income qualified at the time of application. And then there was another question about USDA 502 loans being used for LIFT funded projects. And similar to the issue that we ran in with Fannie Mae or the GSEs, other GSEs, the USDA 502 loans do not allow affordability restrictions to survive a foreclosure. So that kind of critical point is where it doesn't work for a LIFT home buyer. But similar to how we went through a process with Fannie Mae of trying to seek a waiver, we're open to doing that with the USDA as well. Just know that that might take time as well, because they're a large entity, and but it's not unprecedented. And then just one other quick update is that we have been able to refer to the Oregon Fannie Mae rider in the short form land lease, which we believe will really help with future compatibility of those mortgages on LIFT homes. And so with that, I'll just pass it back to Keeble to talk a little bit more about our strategy moving forward.
Thank you, Talia. Our strategies for the short term is to make sure we get the pipeline projects closed. That's something that we're diligently working towards. And we're also in the process of publishing the next NOFA. And like Talia said earlier, we're going to be doing a rolling NOFA this time. And we're trying to find ways to shore up our LIFT home ownership guidelines. We're in the process of looking through our general practice guideline manual and look through some of the specific that applies to home ownership. And we're also trying to find ways to solidify our LIFT home ownership templates so we could close more deals. And long term, like we discussed earlier, we're trying to find ways to streamline this process. So in that process, we're going to be exploring options for LIFT evaluation. We're also going to be looking at challenges to funding rural and multifamily home ownership projects and how we can better subsidize those projects. And we hope that we could continue these dialogues to share updates and collect feedback. So that's our strategic plan so far.
And so with that, we want to open it up to questions. We have a few questions here for you, but I also see questions coming in through the chat. One I just wanted to acknowledge quickly, thanks for sharing, Shannon, that Drew Davis is currently considering requesting a waiver for USDA. That's helpful to know. But I see some other questions, and again, I'm not sure how much we'll be able to answer at this time. So again, we can take a lot of these questions and come back with more conversation, but let's just start maybe by reading them. So let's see. Emily says, if that's the plan, I think you're referring back to the LIFT supplemental. What will OHCS do with the many applications that come in that need supplemental funds? Once it runs out, will we deny those applications or hold them in a queue pending this policy change? So I don't expect that we are going to be able to change our policy related to LIFT valuation this year. So that's not something that we can depend on for NOFA 2024. So unfortunately, once the LIFT supplemental funds run out, it won't be a viable option for those applications. And we're gonna just keep that information posted on our website. And, we have made the eligibility criteria clear. And so yeah, once that money is gone, it's gone. And so we would be looking for applications that can work without the LIFT supplemental funds.
Talia, does that mean that you don't believe that a policy change can be made during the open rolling application period? Like, what if OHCS makes a change in March or April and that rolling application is still open?
We can always amend our NOFA if there are changes to our policy. I think that some of these questions are going to take a long time to explore. So we just can't commit to a specific time frame related to that policy change. So we wouldn't want anybody to be basing their application or like hinging their application on us coming forward with a new solution. Okay, the next piece is, I disagree that taking a security interest in the land is an operational control. It provides for future ownership of the property through foreclosure. The operational controls live in the operating agreement, and except for obtaining ownership through foreclosure, the deed of trust provides only one unique. Okay, so this is a document question. I think we're going to table this question, but we will keep that as something that we need to bring clarity on. I know, Michelle, you've asked kind of similar questions, and so we owe you a response on some of this language agreement.
If I could just really quickly, the Constitution requires ownership for operational control, and that means current ownership. And so the potential for ownership in the event that some really horrible thing that all of us have done wouldn't meet the Constitution. I know, Michelle, that you brought up several other questions and that we are currently discussing.
You're a little hard to hear.
Oh.
You're breaking up a bit.
Sorry, is that better? Okay. Do I need to repeat all of that? Okay. So the constitutional requirement is for current ownership or operational control. So the fact that we might have the ability to have ownership in the future, if something that we all hope doesn't happen does happen, doesn't meet the constitutional requirement. And Michelle, I know that there's a lot more to this question for you. And we've seen it and we've heard it and we're working on it. The Attorney General opinion that Talia referenced earlier, that is publicly available currently, and that OHCS will be posting a link to, does help break down when ownership exists from the AG's perspective, and it does help inform the question of why we don't believe it exists here. Back to you, Talia.
I'm just going to post the memo from the AG in the chat just so that everybody has it here. Jackie asks, what should we expect for a closing timeline for the LIFT NOFA if we're awarded in May, June? When would be the earliest we can close and start construction? I think our goal with all our projects is to have a 6-month closing timeline. So to make it so that our processes are smooth enough, the expectations are set up front, you know what the documents are going to look like, so there's no surprises. We have those documents posted on the website, and we'll be working to improve them, but we can continuously update them. So our goal would be to have projects go from letter of reservation to closing within 6 months. And once you're approved for an award, we can work with you to move your project forward as quickly as you want to.
Can I just follow up on that real quick? So 6 months is a really large timeline to get construction mobilized and in place for your general contractor. So is there a way OHS can get tighter on that? Because past lift projects have closed in like 2 months. So
yeah, I think 6 months would be our timeline of when it's going too long. So that's kind of the maximum.
okay. Thanks.
Okay. See, we have a lot of questions here. Daisy, which was the slide that you were interested in seeing again?
Just the last slide we were on with the short term and the longer term direction moving forward. Thank you so much.
Do you have any specific questions about that one?
No, I just missed the longer term part.
Okay.
So thank you.
So I'm just seeing some other comments that say some of our documents will need to be modified. So in the next couple of deals and moving forward, our partners at the DOJ are invested in working with attorney to make to work on language for these documents. And so I would say that that is an opportunity to share specifics on what needs to be included from your opinion in the lift deed of trust, especially for some of these changes. I don't know if our partners want to chime in at all or add to that. So another question is, what next steps, consideration, deliberation need to happen for OHCS to reach a decision on removing the appraised value limitations? Partners believe this is a clear path. So what do we need to do to make a case for OHCS DOJ, and who has decision-making authority on this issue? And so yeah, I think eventually if it's a change in framework, it would go to our Housing Stability Council, but there's a lot of research that we need to do beforehand to kind of parse what is a constitutional requirement and statutory requirement and need, for the bonds in general to be collateralized. And then there's, and then the other part of the parsing is, what about this is a business decision for OHCS that we can safely choose whether we're taking a risk or not, and then move forward. So I think hearing from partners on ideas around this, we're always open to feedback, but we're going to also be exploring this internally. So just to, we've made some changes related to the NOFA that we've announced here, so nothing different than what you've heard. And those are just kind of the things that we need to do to keep the program moving forward. But then there's these underlying conversations where we're kind of on an exploration mission related to the lift valuation and related to just parsing operational controls. And so that is just something that we'll be working on behind the scenes as we're keeping the program moving, keeping funding coming out, and closing and making sure that you're able to keep building all the projects that you have in mind.
Talia, can I jump in this one a little bit too?
Please.
So I think for those of you that have been in this sphere for the length of time that Lyft has been available for both affordable rental housing and specifically for homeownership, you may recall that it's been somewhat fraught with the question of how well Lyft and the constitutional requirements actually fit as a mechanism for funding or supplementing homeownership in the first place. So a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not entirely. I will say that probably the easiest, and I'm saying easy from our perspective, resolution for this is a constitutional amendment. Because if we had a constitutional amendment that said clearly, you know, that you can utilize Lyft funds for these purposes and here's how you go about doing it, that clears up a whole lot of the conversation, if not all of it, that we're having with OHCS, that you all are having with OHCS and with us and with each other. So, you know, just since the question was asked, I'm going to throw that out there, that the cleanest way to clear all this up is a constitutional amendment, which is why the question of whether or not this falls within OHCS's purview at all is a difficult one to answer, because ultimately, as Talia said, it does come back to a question of what is the scope. So thank you, Talia. And I'm sorry, Emily, was it you that I interrupted?
That's all right. I was just wanting to make a follow-up comment on something Talia said, but I guess I will say in response to you, Kristen, like, I 100% understand that is the cleanest path forward, but it is not a realistic path forward. And so I don't want us to get derailed by that idea. Like, I think there is a path forward without a constitutional amendment. And I guess what I am interested in is, again, how we can help OHCS make that case, how we can help DOJ make that case, and tell you that the follow-up that I wanted to make to you was that please don't actually be having these conversations behind the scenes, but please have them with us. Because I think it's really important to have all of the brains sitting in the room together, trying to figure out what that path forward is that doesn't require the constitutional amendment. And I just, you know, I think we as partners are still pretty baffled to Michelle's recent comment in the chat. Like, there is a path, I think, for homeownership that is very similar to the path on the rental side. And for some reason, like, we just haven't collectively been able to wrap our heads around that and have OHCS and DOJ wrap your collective heads around that with us. And I think that's what we want to know is, like, what's the conversation that needs to happen for that? Do we all need to get in a room together and have like 4 hours? Do we need, you know, who do we need at the table? I was kind of hoping that we were going to get to that level of detail at this meeting, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be able to happen today. So what I'm interested in is, like, how can we get to the concrete, what needs to happen? Because I think we all collectively understand having to go in for supplemental general funds year after year after year as Lyft grows is not a viable option either. And so how do we get to the solution where rural projects, dense projects are all equally viable under Lyft in a real concrete way?
Yeah, noted, Emily. And I think, you know, we're looking for feedback and ideas on many different levels. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat that relate to our agreements. I don't know if there's some ideas around how to streamline some of these suggestions with specific language, because that has been really helpful for us in closing deals and getting just really specific language from different partners, and sometimes they conflict with each other. So it would be helpful. I don't know if it would be helpful to create the shared Google document where everybody could go in, and I acknowledge that that's just one level of changes to the program. That's not the foundational changes. I think we are open to other ideas, and have to have some internal conversations about, or investigation into the, our interpretation of how this can work constitutionally. But I think we're open more than we have been in the past about thinking about different solutions and thinking about what could work. So yes. I think one of the
Okay.
big distinctions that we spoke about earlier related to Lyft rental and Lyft homeownership, and I don't want to put our DOJ partners on the spot, but just that Lyft rental has the ability to have a continuing operating interest in the property and in the improvements in a way that Lyft homeownership does not. And so that gives a level of security in the deal that we don't have necessarily with Lyft homeownership. And so I think there is more to be done to kind of parse that, but that is a key difference that we see, that there is this ongoing operational interest and in the property, and we're able to kind of take account for the full value of the rental property, whereas for homeownership, we're just looking at the land. People.
Shannon had her hand up for me.
Thanks, Keeble. And Talia and Kristen, while I appreciate both of your perspectives, I just fully disagree. So please hear us that many people who do home ownership professionally have disagreed the whole time with this initial interpretation that home ownership is wildly different and inherently riskier than rental. In fact, I think actually, in law, OHCS has more controls throughout the whole time of development and operating after the homes are built than they do with rental. You have more, not less, controls with home ownership. And it's really painful and hard for us that there seems to be a lack of understanding of the strength and validity, the legal validity of the different levels of those controls. Not only does OHCS have the controls, but you get to discern and choose how many of them you want to use at a given time. They are more nuanced than the rental controls even. So it feels like we're in this weird realm where we're trying to communicate but speaking fundamentally different languages. And I think this is why you hear partners saying, can we get in a room for a long period of time? Can we really come together? Because it's hard to convey the strength of those controls in a 5-minute sound bite in a Zoom meeting. It's not a lack of a willingness to be a full partner. It's a consternation that it feels like fundamentally we're speaking different languages still, and that is the heart of the problem as I perceive it. Thank you.
First, I'd like to say thank you, Emily, for the question, and Shannon and Jackie for those thoughtful insight. These conversations are actually helping us as a division move forward to create a space where we could actually create a system that's more predictable, more transparent, and more smooth. I will not lie here and say we could change this overnight. This is something that we're working internally to how we do our rules, how process, and how we could reimagine how we could do this work. And that part of the reimagination is coming from these conversations. So we're working really hard to get a system in place that will create more smiles And we know right now we're trying to put a lot of things together to get through things through the pipeline. And I think that's how we've been operating for a while. But we're trying right now to build a system with you all input in that process. I just cannot tell you that it will take 2 months, because to build some of these things internally could take months to change some of our policies, some of our procedures, go to Stability Council. But I would say that we're further on in those conversations since our meeting in November 30th. So we're exploring many things to make sure we could address the issues that's brought here. And the only thing that I'm asking is that some patience as we work towards building a better process. And we understand that when you're building the process in a big system, it turns slowly, but the voices that we're hearing here, that's part of our decision at the table. That's part of the work that we're doing. And I hope that with some time, you start seeing the changes that are brought up in these meetings, in these space. But I really appreciate the conversation, but we're doing more than just listen. We're trying our best to fix these issues so we can have a smoother process soon.
Brian, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, this is Brian Hoop with Housing Oregon. So following up on with Shannon's comment, Shannon and Kevin and I from Housing Oregon met with OHCS leadership several weeks ago. And one of our asks was a more formal committee to a smaller group of folks to be able to do more of the deep dive that I think Emily and Shannon are asking for. And we would want to make sure someone from the DOJ was participating, and even maybe legislative leaders, and definitely several lenders need to be at that table. So am I missing something? Is there already a work group or a committee that's working with staff? Or I think that's what many of us would like to see, is a formal work group that can work with you over the coming year to do that deep dive discussion.
That's something that we'll keep in our consider.
Thanks.
And just acknowledging Jeffrey's comment here, there seems to be several challenges to effectively utilize LIFT funds for affordable homeownership, particularly for first-time and rural applicants. Lots of moving pieces, overly restrictive requirements, lack of predictability. Okay. Are there other, it sounds like one idea moving forward that OHCS can respond to is this ongoing working group for just continuing to dive into these questions on a regular basis. Are there other ideas for how we can work together to fully understand some of these issues that you're outlining, and also, work towards some program changes? Oh, Katie, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, hi. I've been quietly listening because I think I just want to put in, like, I have a not a unique perspective, but I think my role with LIFT so far has been on the selling side and working with our home buyers to purchase these homes. So I know that there's like several other challenges we're looking at, but when I'm thinking through interpretation of how these come down, I mean, just keeping in front of everybody the access to those first mortgages is still super challenging. And although the Fannie Mae waiver, I honestly need to learn more because I don't see how it actually helps our home buyers get access to financing. And that's the end result. Like, so the interpretation of how this is being interpreted and implemented is having direct impact on the actual home buyers buying the houses. They're limited to what loans they can actually get at all. They can't refinance in the future. That we don't have a refinance option for them right now, and that's a potential issue for the next 40 years for these families buying these homes. And what happens when they go to resell, and that one loan product that we had that was actually speaking with all of this isn't available. So I think I know there's all kinds of other issues, but when I think about like if it's an interpretation of what operational agreements mean and that control, it's just the impact is on these families, not just on the nonprofit trying to develop the project and get it going.
Just filling up, there was a reference to Jackie's comment. If we submit with a supplemental request but are not awarded, will OHCS come back to us and ask if we have another way to balance our pro forma so we can still be awarded lift, or will know, we can build into our application that question as we did last time to give you the option of resubmitting your pro forma. Yeah, and Jeff, the for right now, as we are reviewing, if the land is if the appraisal and the lift loan are the same amount, then we cannot share a first lien position on the land. For our deals that are in the pipeline right now that already received funding, we will work on some solutions related to that. But for moving forward, until we have kind of revisited this structure of valuation and operational controls, we can't share a first lien. But the construction lender is allowed to be exclusively in the first position on the improvements. And then I think the disturbance clause is kind of a question that we need to answer when going back through the documents with our council.
I just quickly follow up on that. So in our experience, sorry, Shannon, I just want to follow up on this. You can't say that the construction lenders are allowed to be in exclusive first position on the improvement, but then say that, well, maybe the disturbance clause might not be approved, because in our direct experience working the OJ, y'all said they could do that, and then they asked for the remedies and the disturbance clause that would allow them to be in first position on the improvements, and you said no. So I just want to be really careful with saying what we can and can't do as we all put together our lift applications in 2024, because if our lenders are being told they will be allowed to be in first position on the improvements, that has to mean all of the details that DOJ currently has said no to.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I think that is something that, as we are going through the subordination agreements and intercreditor agreements, I think that is all language that we can look at again. No promises, but that's language that we can. Shannon?
Thank you. And thank you again for this conversation and coming to the table and committing to doing this work, right? Thank you. For this upcoming NOFA, we find ourselves with $5 million in LIFT supplemental resources. I guess I'm just wondering, is there a plan B, given the time that seems to be needed by the department? So, for example, has the department given any consideration to allocating some home resources that you have on hand for home ownership, since that's an allowable use as home and it's been an internal departmental choice to allocate it all for rental? Or to go back to the legislature during the short session, express this need and ask for additional general fund resources to pair with LIFT? Has any action like that been taken?
Yeah, so,
I-
oh, great. Yes.
Hi, Dahlia. I'll just jump in here. I do know that there are forthcoming asks from the legislature. We always kind of sit in kind of an odd position as a state agency in these short sessions where we don't strictly have a place where we can bring something like this forward. We don't kind of get the budget asks that we do during long session. We have, I've had partners reach out about kind of what that would need to look like in order for it to be useful. And we've provided them with kind of the budget language and the information that they need to advocate for that. But we really can't make that ask during short session.
Thanks, Alexandra. I don't think that speaks to a home internal allocation, though.
Oh, no, that was not covering home. That was just covering the legislative bit. I will direct the home question to Talia.
Yeah, that's not something that's
I could answer
been
that question.
able. Oh, go for it.
We haven't had that discussion yet, but all options could be on the table. We haven't had that discussion yet. I know that the 5 million have caused a lot of issues with these projects, but we haven't had those internal discussions yet.
And we appreciate ideas like that. I just want to acknowledge Emily's comment in here. That's a just example of how density, how LIFT doesn't currently work for dense projects. And so when a policy change could get them funded moving forward, yeah, I think we just encourage you to keep sharing these examples as we are also working through trying to find a better solution. I think that kind of understanding what it looks like on the ground is very helpful. But yeah, we hear you that that's a big issue with LIFT. Are there other, I know we're not quite answering questions in a way that probably feels gratifying to everybody, but are there other questions that people want to pose here? And then I think our commitment would be just coming back with some really tangible ways of continuing to move the conversation forward, whether it's, committing to that working group, setting up a system for some more feedback on the documents, making sure that we're hearing more examples. I think we just have some work to do to get that together. But are there other issues that people want to just bring up here to make sure that they're not left out as we continue our thinking and conversations? Okay, well, I'll pass it over to Keeble to close us out, but we can commit to following up within the next couple of weeks on some next steps, and we'll email it out to the group that's on this call. We'll also probably send it out through a TA or through our network, but we will be following up. This isn't the last of this conversation, obviously, but I'll pass it over to you, Keeble.
Thank you, Talia. You did a great job. Really appreciate everyone being here today for this robust conversation. Really enjoyed the fact that we're able to continue this discussion. As I stated during our presentation, these are system changes that we're doing internally and with the guidance of everyone's voice here. And I'm hopeful that we're going to find and land in a position where we could create a smoother process. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really look forward to us updating you all more on how we're getting things through the pipeline, what the next NOFA would be like, and how we also work in some of the challenges that are currently on the plate for all of us So I really appreciate everyone being here today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.